So, up to this point, when we've been graphing numbers on the number line, we've just been putting a dot somewhere on a line. But suppose we had two numbers and we wanted to graph them both at the same time. Then we'd actually produce a graph on what's called the coordinate plane. Welcome to the coordinate plane. You can see that we actually have two number lines here. We've got this number line here, which I'm calling x, and this vertical number line here, which I'm calling y. And it turns out that every point on the plane can be identified with two numbers, an x value followed by a y value. And we're always going to agree upon this. The very first number we're going to give ourselves is going to be an x value, and the second number is going to be a y value. So just to sort of warm up to this, I want us to first just try to give the coordinates, which means give the x comma y, for each of the points A, B, C, D. Well, let's take a look. Here's A. So we write these as a pair. Now, technically what we say is we write this as an ordered pair, which means we open up a parenthesis, and I'm going to write the coordinates of A with respect to x. So I look at how far over I move in the x direction, and you can see here it's at -2. So x is -2. And what's y? Well, now I'm looking at this number line and see how high it is. I see it's located at 3. So the coordinates of the point A are actually -2, 3. That means if we start at the very center, which is 0, 0, sometimes called the origin, we move -2 in the x direction, that's 2 units to the left, boom, boom, and 3 units in the y direction, which means 3 units up, boom, 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 and there's A. So that's how we write the coordinates of A. Let's try B here. So B, we start at the origin, we move over to the left, so that's going to be at -3. We always write the x first, by the way. And what's the y? It's a little tricky, but notice that with respect to the number line at y, we're at 0. We're not up or down. We're right on the x-axis, which is when y is 0. So the coordinates of B are -3, 0. What about C? Well, C actually is right at what we call the origin, which is 0 in the x and 0 in the y. So this is actually 0, 0. And finally, D, what are its coordinates? We always do the x first. So here I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's lined up under the 4, so it's 4 in the x. And I have to go down, which means negative, and in this case it's -2 in the y. So the coordinates at this point are 4, -2. Now it turns out that the coordinate plane is divided up into 5 pieces. There are the 2 axes, that's like one piece, and then there's the 4 areas left over. And these 4 areas are actually called quadrants, quad, because quad means 4. And in fact, we actually give numbers to these quadrants. This quadrant here, where the x's are positive numbers and the y's are positive numbers, that's actually called the first quadrant. And usually we use Roman numerals for these, by the way, tradition. Here, we move over in a counterclockwise direction, and we see that in this region where the x's are negative but the y's are positive, this is the second quadrant. We keep sliding over where both the x's are negative and the y's are negative, that's the third quadrant. And the final quadrant where the x's are positive but the y's are negative, that's called the fourth quadrant. So in fact, if we take a look at these points, let's see which quadrant these points are in. Well, A, that's squarely seated inside of the second quadrant. B looks tricky, but actually B is on the coordinate axes, and so in fact, that is in no quadrant. You have to be in one of these 4 regions on the axes. You're not in any quadrant. So B is not in any quadrant, as is C. C is right at the cross of these 2 number lines, so it's not in one of these 4. It's not in a quadrant either. But the point at D is, in fact, in the 4th quadrant. So first, second, third, fourth. A is in the second quadrant, D is in the 4th quadrant, and B and C are on the axes, and so they're not in any quadrant at all. Welcome to the coordinate plane.